Okay, what is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the number one student podcast in the world, the Student Podcast. Today we're here with episode 19. This is going to be a pretty kind of chilled out episode. I asked you guys loads of questions. Well, I asked you guys to give me loads of questions, sorry. And we got tons. We probably got about 100 questions the other week on my Instagram. And so I couldn't go through them all on my Instagram and on my YouTube. So I thought I'd just sit down and have like a bit of a chilled out podcast. You can see the new setup. What do you think? This is my new monitor. I thought I'd just rotate the camera around slightly to make it a little bit more kind of chilled out environment. We've got the Christmas tree in the corner here. Can you hear that? With ASMR for you. Little Christmas tree because we're getting festive. We're moving into the festive season. We've got a nice little Santa over here. We've got some fairy lights. And if you listen to this on the audio, just quickly hop over to the YouTube channel and you'll see the setup. Anyway, before we dive into the questions that you guys have asked me, I've kind of broken it down into probably about 12 questions that I'm going to fly through today in the next 45 minutes to an hour. But before we dive into the kind of questions, I thought I'd just give you a quick update on what's going on at the moment. First things first, is it just me or am I absolutely buzzing to get a couple of weeks off over Christmas? I'm literally desperate, and I think we're all extremely kind of desperate for just a couple of weeks off over Christmas. This has probably been the toughest year of everyone's lives. We've gone through a really tough year, and even though we're going through a really tough year, I feel like it's kind of flown by. It's crazy to think that I'm talking about Christmas and Christmas is 2 weeks away, when we've literally been in a pandemic almost like 8 months now, 10 months now, which is absolutely crazy. But I think in some ways it's just flown by, and I think we've all done extremely well, and I think we all deserve a well-deserved kind of couple of weeks off over Christmas, especially leading into the new year. And I think going into the new year, we can be kind of quite optimistic about the future and what's going to happen in the next year or so. Obviously, with the vaccine coming out at the moment, obviously we don't know how kind of available it's going to be, how many people are going to be able to get the vaccine in the next few months. But I think it's something that we can really kind of be optimistic about. Obviously, I don't know whereabouts you are across the world. If you're listening to this in the UK, you obviously understand what I'm talking about. And I think we can go into 2021 with quite like good optimism. I think we could be quite motivated and be quite excited to what kind of 2021 is going to bring. We can start going back to a bit more of normality, start seeing your friends, start going out for meals, go back to university environments, go back to your workplace, whatever it is, see people. And I think these next few weeks leading into the new year, if we can all have just a couple of weeks off, whether you're studying, whether you're at work, obviously I understand that a lot of people around the country probably won't be able to have time off because it's probably been the most stressful time of their careers and people are fighting for their jobs, etc. But I think over Christmas we just need to all relax a little bit, take some time away, step away from our workplace, take our foot off the gas, hit that reset button like I say quite often. Because I think we all deserve just a couple of weeks off before kind of leading into the new year and kind of setting up kind of 2021 as an exciting year for us all to really start tackling things and start moving forward. Because I feel like a lot of us have been stagnant, a lot of us have maybe lost a job or not been able to get a job, or there's so many things that obviously have contributed towards this year being probably one of the toughest years ever. But I think we could be quite optimistic going into 2021, and I'm definitely excited to get, like, literally I booked off 6 days leading up to my Christmas break, so I finish on the 17th and then I go back to work on the 4th, so that's literally almost 3 weeks off from work, which I'm super happy about and glad about. Literally just taking a couple of weeks of doing nothing, not picking up the camera, not doing Instagram, probably taking myself away from social media for a bit and just relaxing, enjoying time, being around the house, going on walks, seeing my family, spending time with people obviously in my house, watching films, and just really trying to relax for a few weeks before resetting myself going into the new year. And I think we can be quite optimistic, and I'm obviously being quite optimistic in that sense. Hopefully we can start going back to a bit of normality and we can be a little bit excited about something again, because I feel like the excitement, the enjoyment out of everything at the moment has kind of been drained away from us. It's been sucked out of us. But I want to kind of remind you guys that 2021 is going to be a good year. I promise you. Let's be optimistic. Let's be motivated. Let's be on it. Let's work towards our goals. Let's absolutely go after every goal and absolutely fly through the challenges that are going to be in front of us next year. And next year is going to be a good year. Anyway, that's enough of me kind of rambling on, as normal. I have lots and lots of questions from you guys. I'm going to dive into them. I'm going to cover them as much as I possibly can in the next 45 minutes or an hour or so. And so, yeah, the first question we have is, do you agree with the, if you want an easy life, don't be an architect? It's really annoying / worrying me. So I think you could apply this. I think firstly, obviously, there is this kind of stigma towards architects and studying architecture that it's not going to be an easy life, but I feel like you could also apply that logic to anything that you go into. And I think that all depends on your mindset and kind of what your goals are, what your aspirations are, how successful you want to be, what success is. And obviously we could go off on loads of tangents here. But essentially I feel like that question you could ask yourself with any profession. I think that can apply to anything in life, whether you're going into graphic design, whether you're going into music, whether you're going into fitness. Any profession that you go into, you could say that, do I want an easy life? Do I want a hard life? You can question yourself or ask yourself those kinds of questions. And I think it all boils down to what kind of person you are. You could go into music, and essentially things down the line are not going to be easy. You're going to face times when it's going to be challenging. You're going to face times when it's going to be really easy and kind of rewarding and successful. But essentially any profession that you go into, it's not going to be easy if you want to get to the top and if you want to do well and if you want to be successful. And I think that kind of mindset of going into something, wanting it to be easy, is probably not the correct mindset to be in if you want to be successful and you want to get far in life. I personally go into everything with full throttle, give it my 100%, no matter what. And you're going to face challenges along the way, and you're just going to have to prepare yourself to know and to realise that you're going to have to face those challenges. You're going to go through your tough times. You're going to go through times where you're going to be really successful and it's going to be great. But essentially anything you go into, it's going to be hard in some capacity and in some ways. And whether that's mental or physical things, there's all sorts of things that could kind of head towards it being quite a difficult career path. But I think that just depends on your kind of mindset going into that profession. However, that being said, going into architecture is difficult. Like it's one of those things you have to face where you're going into a profession, sorry, I'm mumbling now. You're going into a profession where it's going to be super chaotic, super stressful, the hours are crazy, the amount of work you got to do are crazy. But I also think it's about how you apply yourself. It doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be chaotic. It doesn't have to be stressful. If you apply yourself, if you plan out your time, if you balance everything as best as you possibly can, you'll find a lot of ways to make things a lot easier. And you'll realize across how many years you're in the profession, you'll find different methods and ways to make things easier. It doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to make it hard. If you put your mind to something, you can make it easier. It doesn't have to be extremely difficult. But I also think it's just about your mindset going into that. If you want it to be hard, it's going to be hard. If you want it to be easy, you can make it easy. But along the way, whatever profession you're going into, it's going to be difficult in some stages. So I think there is this kind of stigma towards architects and it being the hardest thing to go into. Yes, it is difficult. Yes, you have to dedicate a lot of time, effort, stress, pain, blood, sweat and tears, lots of sleepless nights, the whole lot. But you can easily avoid a lot of those things by just kind of thinking about what you're doing and kind of preparing, I guess, for the profession and for your kind of studies or work. I think if you prepare and you plan and you schedule and you balance, you can easily make things much, much easier. So I think that question is a very good question, but I also think you should apply that question to lots of other things in life, and I think you'll get kind of like a different perspective on it if you start doing that. Next question. How to build connections starting first year. So I think building connections it's obviously all about speaking to people, getting involved as many people as possible. Obviously right now in this current situation, it's very difficult to meet people face to face. It's very difficult to get in a situation where you're going to be meeting people and meeting large groups of people. However, right now probably social media is the most accessible it's ever been, and there's probably more people on social media than there's ever been. So in some ways, though we can't see people right now and we can't connect with people visually face to face, we can connect with more people digitally, and I think that opens up another door where we can begin to build connections online. And I think in first year, I say this to quite a few people, I think it's all about setting yourself up for second year, third year, for your part one job out, for part two, for when you finally qualify. The years before being qualified are going to be extremely important to building up your portfolio, building up your connections. So if I was in first year, I'd absolutely connect with as many people as possible, talk to many people as possible, message as many people as possible. The place I'd definitely start, the place that I would advise you to start with connecting with people, make yourself an Instagram account, whether that's to do with architecture, whether that's a personal account, just to kind of follow people and get connecting with people. Make yourself a LinkedIn account for sure, a professional account where you're going to be connecting with people professionally and you can contact people professionally. And then just kind of spreading your work, spreading your ideas, spreading your personality through those mediums will begin to kind of help you create some kind of connections, whether that's within your profession or whether that's not. I think just building as many people as possible and building your connectivity, your kind of community and your kind of portfolio of people is really important in the early years of your career, and I think that will really help you set yourself up for the future. So 3 steps here: download Instagram, create an Instagram account, download LinkedIn, sign up for LinkedIn, create a LinkedIn account and start connecting with people, and express your personality, your work, your skills through those 2 platforms. And I think that's a really good way to kind of start connecting with people online. And if you're asking the question, how do you know what kind of people to connect with? Literally just, if you know someone from uni, connect with them. See what kind of people they're connecting with. Connect with the people they're connecting with. Message some of the people. Look at people's work. If you like their work, connect with them. If a tutor's coming in or an external tutor's coming in to do a review with you, connect with her after she's left or connect with him after he's left. If there's an external architect coming in to review people's work again, connect with them, talk to them, make conversation. There's many, many ways to be able to connect with people, and there's so many opportunities, and there's so many during my kind of 3 years at university, if someone came into uni or even in that final year when we had kind of online reviews, straight away after I'd connect with them so they'd remember who I was, and therefore they'd think, oh yeah, I just did a review with that person, I'll connect with them actually. And there you go, that's another connection, and then you can connect with them. It's so easy to kind of build this kind of community and this kind of connections that will really help you kind of set yourself up for the future. Tips on building a portfolio as a first year architecture student. Firstly, I'd say for first year students, absolutely definitely focus on using a pen or a pencil in a sketchbook or on tracing paper. Absolutely build up the basics and build up your knowledge in understanding simple drawings, simple types of drawings, how to scale, different pieces of equipment that you can use with your hands. Forget the laptop for the first year for sure. Building up your first year portfolio, being quite creative with it, doing collages, printing out things, cutting them up, sticking them up, laying them over each other. Be quite creative with it. I think first year is an opportunity to be able to explore things for sure, explore different mediums, explore kind of what your skill set is, whether you're good at drawing, whether you're good at model making. I think first year is definitely an opportunity just to broaden your horizons and understand the basics of what architecture is. And the basics come from drawing and sketching and making those small diagrams and those spatial diagrams and those kind of 3D volumes with model making. And I think the basic thing to do in first year is just building a portfolio based up off testing different things and exploring different ideas. And I think that is the important thing of going into first year, is just exploring as many things as possible. First crit experience. And I did realise that we've got quite a few kind of questions about crits, so I think I'm going to dive into a little bit more detail about my crits. So my first crit experience was, as you can all probably know, if you're all in architecture and you're all studying architecture, your first crit experience is probably the most scary thing you'll ever do. Like, going into your first crit is probably the most daunting, the most anxious, the most stressed out I've ever been, for sure. I remember my first project there was 4 of us, I think. Yeah, there was 4 of us. The task was obviously split between us, so we were presenting together as one kind of group. And this was our first project of studying architecture, and I think it was a 4-week project or a 5-week project or a 6-week project. I'm not entirely sure, but we didn't know each other very well at all. And the thing is, you knew that you're going to have to stand up in front of people and present. And personally, for me, when I was at school, I was not that guy to talk in front of people. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Whenever we were in an English class and they'd ask us to read a page out of the book, I'd be the person hiding behind the book to make sure she doesn't pick me, the teacher doesn't pick me. I was that person that was scared to speak in front of people. I didn't want to be involved in those kind of situations. I hated standing in front of people and public speaking because I was so nervous and anxious, and I just wasn't very like a confident human being. I wasn't a confident person, and it wasn't natural for me to stand up in front of groups of people. So going into this first crit, I remember I was absolutely cacking myself. I was scared, proper. And I just remember the night before, none of us knew what we were going to say. And so we all messaged each other the night before, like, right, what are we actually going to say? Because we've got the review tomorrow. We need to know what we're going to say. Otherwise, we're going to go in and completely wing it. So we split it up between us. I think it was like a 5 or 10 minute presentation. I think it was 5 minutes. I don't think it was long at all. So we literally had like a minute each to present, which is nothing now thinking about it. And I remember we split up the kind of the wording between us and what we were going to kind of talk about on the wall. And I remember I literally wrote out a paragraph of word to word what exactly I was going to say. And I remember reading it over and over and over again on that night. I couldn't sleep that night. I was thinking through in my head, don't miss anything. Make sure you say that. Make sure you say that. Yeah. And I just read this paragraph over and over again to make sure that I was going to, when I was coming to speak, I would speak that paragraph and it'd be perfect because I wrote it prior and it'd be spot on. It didn't go to plan. That was not what happened. We went into this presentation. The moment I stood up, the moment they kind of called out the people to present next, they were like, right, Tom, your group, go on, present. The moment you stand up next to a board in front of 30 people to actually present, everything goes out the window. Everything you learnt, everything you remembered, all the notes you made, everything goes out the window. And the moment you start talking, game over. No, I'm joking, it's not actually. That was a bit dramatic. But for me, going into that presentation, I remember standing up, I was shaking, I was holding a piece of paper, shaking. And I think I literally began to read this kind of paragraph out loud. And halfway through, I lost track of where I was in the paragraph because sometimes when I was presenting, I would read from a piece of paper and I'd kind of look up to obviously make it a little bit more engaging rather than just stood there with a piece of paper. I'd look up and kind of carry on talking, then look down. I remember once I looked up, I looked down, completely lost track of where I was in my paragraph. So I was like, right, I'm just going to wing this. Try to wing it. Obviously, if you do that in your first presentation, when you don't really know much about architecture, you don't really know what's going on, you don't really know what you're talking about, you just begin to talk a load of rubbish. And I think that's just what happened with me. I just panicked, I flustered, I went extremely red, and I still go extremely red. I go red when I'm filming these podcasts. I'm still not 100% good at it, but I'm much, much better now at talking to people and presenting in front of people. But back then, that first presentation was awful, and I really, really did hate it, and I'll never, ever forget that first presentation, how scared I was. But also after the relief after it's done, after hours of thinking what could go wrong, what's going to happen, the relief of sitting down after and think, I've just done that. And then you think to yourself, that wasn't actually too bad. That wasn't actually too scary or daunting. And then actually in first year, because we had so many projects and there was so many things to present, we probably presented about 10 or 15 times in first year. And so by the end of first year, I was thinking, I could get into grips with this. I could get quite comfortable with presenting. And it's one of those things that the more you do it, the more comfortable you become. And then leading into third year, even though I was still extremely nervous going into third year presentations, I was extremely anxious. Obviously, there's a lot more on the line. You're going into your degree year, and obviously these presentations are extremely important. But as soon as I began to start speaking and I knew my projects inside out, they became easier and easier to present and talk about. But in the first year, nightmare. But I just think it's important just to stay as chilled out as possible and just kind of think, what is the worst that's going to happen? Really, you're probably going to stutter a little bit, you're going to mumble over your words a little bit, but everyone else is in the same position, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, that is my first year crit. Next question, what do you do when you get conflicting crits from your professors? I think this happens quite a lot. I think you kind of get used to this over the 3 years that you're in university, or the 5 years or whatever you're doing. I think for me, it's about finding a balance in how much information you take from each tutor and kind of think about what they're saying. Because obviously you could get feedback from one tutor and then you could get feedback from the other tutor, and they could be completely different. And the whole idea, they're conflicting. You don't know which kind of route to go down. But a lot of the time, it's about following your gut, understanding what direction you personally want your project to go into, but also understanding the actual knowledge and the feedback you're getting from both tutors. So sometimes it's easier just to continue in the path you're going, but take bits of information from both and really try and develop your project from both kind of tutors' feedback, rather than kind of going completely one way and then the other one continue conflicting, or go completely the other way. Maybe just try and take both feedback and take as much information from both feedback as possible, so that you're not constantly kind of conflicting your ideas, and just make sure that you feel like you are heading in the right direction. Make sure you feel like you are constantly improving and developing your project. I think that's the most important thing. Maybe if there was a lead tutor and you feel like she understands your project better, or he understands your project better, maybe go down that route a little bit more, kind of lead towards the person that you feel like understands your project a little bit better. Because remember, also sometimes when external people coming in, they don't understand your project very well, and they're probably just saying things off kind of first glance, and they're saying things off the top of their head to trying to give you feedback. And sometimes they just don't know your project as much as you know your project, as much as your tutor knows your project. So I think it's just all about trusting yourself and trusting your tutor's feedback, and understanding kind of how much to take from your tutors and how much to take from the feedback. Because I think it's really important to take that feedback on board for sure. Like, there's so many students that don't take their feedback on board, and they kind of put off completely what their tutor's saying, and they end up going down a road where they don't necessarily want to go down, and they end up going down a road where their tutor told them not to go down, and then they end up not doing very well. So I think it's really important to obviously listen to your tutors for sure, but taking bits of information from the crits. Next question, tips on presenting your projects. So another one kind of related to crits. For me, it's all about telling the story as best as possible. Every single thing that you do, every single thing that you pin up on the wall, it needs to be able to tell the story of your project. And I think that is the easiest way to be able to present your ideas and present your projects, because it's so much easier to read and it's so much easier to understand your project if you are telling a full story, a complete story. Everything that you are putting up on the wall, every kind of order, every bit of font, every bit of colour, all tells the story of your projects. And I think that's the most important thing. For me, going into crits, the one thing that I kind of really focused on to make sure that I was presenting my projects as best as possible, and to make sure that the crits were going to be as best as possible, I would personally get as much information up on the wall as humanly possible, so that if I ever mess up my speech, if I ever mess up my presentation, I would know that once I step away from the presentation, they could still understand the work on the wall. The work was still there. The information was still there. They could still understand my project. They could still understand the story. And I think that's the most important thing, is that when you're not there, you want your work to be able to tell the story and to tell the work by itself. You don't need to be there to tell the story. And I think sometimes when you're presenting your work, and sometimes when you're preparing for a review, maybe just step back and think, look at the work and think, if I wasn't here to tell this project, would it be able to tell exactly what's going on? Would I be able to tell the story of my work right now? And I think sometimes I did that. Obviously, there's a balance between cramming too many things on the wall and overdoing it, overkilling the amount of work that's on the wall. And sometimes it's easy to not put enough on the wall and not tell enough of the story. So I think you've got to find that balance where you're not cramming everything up there, you're not putting everything up there, because obviously if you've got panels that are way too overpopulated, it can be quite daunting, and there's too much information kind of going on, and it could be quite misleading. So it's all about finding balance. I think through experience, you'll find better ways to be able to represent your work and present your projects. And I think over experience, for sure, it will help you and understand what things to remove, what things to keep. And it's like that phrase about killing your babies, kind of Obviously, you might have a piece of work that you really, really like and you want to put up at the wall. But if it doesn't tell the story of your project, or if it doesn't help towards you telling your project and explaining your project, there's no point in it being up there. So it's just one of those things where you've got to cut those things out, cut the things out that aren't going to be useful in helping you tell that story. So I think there's many things to kind of presenting your ideas and your projects as best as possible. But I think it boils down to everything being up on the wall is there to tell the story. You don't want to overcomplicate it, but you also want to be able to step away from that work and for the project to tell the project without you being there to talk about it. Next question. Best ways to be positive after a brutal tutor crit. I've been there. I've been there where we've had brutal crits, we've had brutal tutorials, we've had brutal reviews. I've been there multiple times. It happens to everyone. But I think the important thing is like you say, the best way to take positives out of that is to take the positives, take the feedback, and think like they're only saying this to help you. They're only saying this to help you be as successful as possible, to make your project as best as possible. Don't think of it from a point of view where you feel like they're attacking your work, because they're not. They're just trying to help you develop the work and head your work in the right direction. They're essentially there to help you. And I think that's the important thing, is that you have to understand that every feedback they're giving you is to head you in the right direction and to get the best out of your project as possible. And essentially the people, the tutors, the external architects that are coming in, they're all experienced people. They all know what they're talking about. And they're going to give you your grade. So at the end of the day, you have to listen to what they are saying, because I promise you, they will be heading you in the right direction. So I think the important thing is just to not take the feedback as a negative thing. Take it as a positive thing. Tell yourself, they're trying to help me. They're trying to encourage me. They're trying to lead me in the right direction. They're trying to make me be as best as I possibly can. So I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to understand what they are saying, and I'm going to improve, and I'm going to take the positives out of what they're saying. Or turn those positives or turn those negatives into a positive. Use it as a motivation. If a crit doesn't go very well, use it as a motivation to make sure the next crit is going to be spot on, or it's going to be much better. And then make sure you show them up in the next project. Make sure that you turn up to the next review, the next tutorial with loads of work, and work that is really good and what they've kind of asked for. And they'll kind of sit back and think, yeah, you've actually listened to me, and you've actually done really well, and you've kind of acted on my feedback. And kind of show them up. Just be like, yeah, I can do it. If they're really being that negative, just be like, yeah, look at me. Like, I'm here. I'm here because I want to be here. I'm here because I want to be an architect. And you just turn that negativity into a positive, and just kind of show them up. And I'll just use it as motivation, as fuel to the fire, to make sure that you constantly improving every project. And I think it's important to understand that not every project's going to be spot on. Not every project's going to be perfect. You're not going to have the best idea from the off in every project. You're not going to be nailing it every time, because that's not what happens. And I think it's important just to understand that you're constantly learning, you're constantly developing, you're constantly trying to improve, and you're constantly trying to be better. And I think that's the most important thing to kind of keep in mind. Next question. Let's have a little quick sip of water. Next question. What is your next 5 years plan? So I think it's very difficult to plan, especially at the moment with the pandemic. You don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where I'm going to end up in the next year, never mind in the next 5 years. But if everything went perfectly, if everything went to plan, as say, I'd finish my part one, working out as a part one architecture assistant in August, September time. I'd go into my masters for 2 years. I'd come out of my masters, work another year as a part two architectural assistant. And I think for me, within that time though, I will be studying and I will be working. I want to personally start turning my brand, me as a person, into a business, start turning it into something that I could then turn into a business once I come out of studying and once I finish everything, because I've always had the dream of having my own practice, having my own studio, having my own place that I'm going to run. And I think that is going to be a goal of mine for many years. So I think the plan for the next 5 years is turn my studio into a business, turn it into a practice, and start understanding how I can begin to just basically start doing freelance work, start working with other people, start collaborating with other people, start building more connections, and just kind of get my feet in the world of architecture. And I think at the moment I'm still very early on. I'm still only a Part 1 architecture assistant. I've got years and years and years of experience and development to come. But I think in the next 5 years, I do want to begin to turn me, my brand, my studio into some kind of business and begin to start heading myself in the right direction to be able to have my own practice sometime in the future, but also alongside get my master's degree, finishing my Part 1 architecture assistant job and finishing a Part 2 architectural assistant job. And the next question: did life after graduation meet the expectations you had whilst you were at university? I think we all have this kind of have this analogy that when we're going to leave uni, we're going to enter this world of absolutely fantasticness. We're going to be able to design things like Zaha Hadid. We're going to be able to walk into Foster's and Partners and be really influential and do amazing things, and everything's going to be glamorous. Everything's going to be perfect. We're going to be able to do all of these things and get involved with all these people and go out to sites and travel the world and all of this kind of thing. I think this is the thing we dream about as architects, as studying architecture. And we think that this is going to be an instant goal. But really, the reason why studying architecture is such a long career, to be able to even become a professional architect, it's going to take me like 8 years or 7 or 8 years to become a professional architect. There's a reason for that, and that's because there's so much to learn. There's so much that comes from experience and developing and learning as many things as possible. And you're not going to be able to walk into practice and do amazing things because you're not. It's not how it is. So I think leaving university, there was this kind of overriding experience or feeling of like, I've absolutely dreamt of being an architect my whole life. I'm going out into the world now and I'm really going to get involved. But then sometimes you just have to face the reality that that's not going to happen straight away, and it's going to take time and it's going to take experience, and you're going to have to meet people. You're going to have to get trust from people because there is so much to learn and there's so much to explore within the profession. However, I have personally really enjoyed coming out of studying university. I really, really kind of needed time off from studying because I feel like throughout the 3 years that I was studying, I had so many ups and downs. I had so many tiredless, sleepless nights, stressful evenings. And I did put a lot of kind of pressure mentally on myself as well as physically, but probably more predominantly mentally. I really did kind of beat myself up over the 3 years, and I didn't really look after myself as best as I possibly could. So I was just desperate for some time off, and a lot of people did go straight into their masters because of the pandemic, and obviously universities provided kind of a master's course straight after your BA Honours, but I personally felt like I needed some time away from studying architecture, and I needed to get some experience, and I needed to get some kind of understanding of the actual world of architecture and get myself out there and actually beginning to explore whether I want to actually move forward in this profession, because I feel like the moment that you go into practice, you begin to understand whether this is what you want to do or not, because I feel like at university it's very different to working in a practice, and I've had experience now in 3 practices, and I think that's really kind of helped me in understanding what kind of direction I want to go into, what type of architecture I want to do, and kind of just whether you want to be in this profession and whether you want to kind of commit to this profession. So I think there was this kind of expectation of coming out of university, but at the same time I personally just felt like I needed to come out and step away from studying and have some time where I can build up some experience, meet some people, earn a little bit of money, live on my own for a bit and do my own thing, get myself out there in the world. And I think that's what I've done, and I think I've really enjoyed that. Obviously, with lockdown, I've had to stay at home and live at home, which has been far from ideal because I'd much rather be in London, meeting the people in the practice, doing things in London, having my own little place in London and communicating and connecting with people, and have been involved in like the studio community within the practice. Obviously we haven't been able to do that, so that kind of expectations kind of been a little bit lower than obviously I expected, because we were all hoping to come out of university and go into a practice, go into a working environment And we obviously haven't been able to do that with working at home. So that's probably one of the things that kind of set me back. But I think I understood what I was going into, basically. I understood what was going to happen when I was going to come out of university. And I think it's important for other students out there, if you think that you're going to step out into this glamorous and glorious lifestyle of being an architect, it's not going to be like that. You're going to have to go through years of kind of hard work and stress and challenges, and you have to build up your experience, build up your trust with people, and then you can begin to kind of reap the rewards and really start to get involved in really big projects. And I think it just takes time, and I think that's the important thing to understand when coming out of university. Do you think you'll be able to live off YouTube, or would you not want to? I think in maybe 10 years' time, I could live off YouTube if I'm still doing YouTube in 10 years' time. Right now, I definitely couldn't. I don't think I could. I've only got 15,000 subscribers. We're literally like a couple off 15,000. And probably for a good few years, I don't think I'd be able to live off YouTube because the money isn't that good. Unless you've got thousands and thousands, like millions of subscribers, that's when you can begin to live off YouTube and the earnings from monetization and stuff. But I don't think I'd want to either, to be honest. I want to be able to get involved in the architecture profession, continue my career in architecture, but also maybe use YouTube as a way of expressing my experiences and telling my story to you guys, pretty much just continuing what I'm doing now, but all stages throughout my career. I think that'd be really interesting. And obviously filming, if I do create a studio and do create a practice, that'd be cool to kind of showcase the process of that and the business side of that and start showing those kinds of things. So I've got a lot of exciting things that will keep me going for the next good few years of YouTube, but I don't think I'll end up properly living off just YouTube. I think that is kind of a bit too far in the distance to think about right now. And the final question, the question that we're going to finish up on: how do you deal with not being satisfied with your projects in architecture? How do you deal with it? I think this is something that is kind of continuing what I was saying earlier about using it as motivation. For me, if I'm not satisfied with a project, if I'm not happy with a project, if a project hasn't gone the way I wanted it to go, I use that as motivation to make sure the next project's going to be even better. The concept's going to be even better, the ideas are going to be better, the way I represent the work is going to be better, the way I tell the story is going to be better, the way I present the work in reviews, everything about it is going to be better. And I think I use bad projects and projects that haven't gone my way and projects that haven't gone in the direction I wanted them to go into, I use them as motivation to make sure the next one's going to be even better, and to make sure that I use that to kind of propel me forward. And it's that idea of constantly progressing and constantly wanting to learn and constantly be better with every project, with every day, with every month that goes by. So I think that is how I kind of bounce back off projects that I don't personally think have been my best. Obviously, throughout university, there's going to be many projects which you aren't going to like, and I promise you, even when you come out of university, the projects that you did like, you'll look back and you think, God, that wasn't very good. And I promise you'll go through many of those projects where you'll kind of look back and think like, yeah, that could have been much, much better. Like even now, looking back at my final year project, my thesis that got me awards, got me a really good grade at university, sometimes I look back at that and think, I could have done this better, I could have done that better. Why not do that? Hang on, I don't like that drawing. So I think there's always kind of opportunities for improvement, and there's always opportunities to be better at every project. And I think over time and over experience, you'll understand how to be able to generate better concepts, better ideas, better ways of representing your work. And I think the whole idea of this podcast was talking about experience, and I think that is probably one of the best things, in understanding that every project can be better, and every project you can improve, and taking feedback negatively, turn it into a positive, and just constantly trying to improve, constantly use negative things from people and people doubting you and people saying that your work's not very good. Use it as motivation to make sure you're better every single project. And I think that's the best thing you can possibly do, and just making sure that you work as hard as humanly possible is probably the best thing that you can do at university. And yeah, I think that is going to be a wrap on today's podcast. We've gone off on a couple tangents. I'm out of breath as always. I'm always out of breath when I film these podcasts because I talk so blooming quick. And yeah, that's going to be a wrap. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you for listening if you listen to this on the audio, and I will see you next time. Peace.